So this is going to put a little bit more into health issues directly, especially over the Holocene. Spread of forming new diseases and rising civilizations, the mid-Holocene optimum. So we looked at the exit out of the Younger Dryas and the last glacial maximum into the post-glacial warming. So we had seen this before. In fact, this is from one of Tony Michael's papers looking at millennial before Common Era in thousands of years and centuries since Common Era in hundreds of years. We looked at climatic optimum 1 and 2. Sahara was green, civilizations expanded, and then Sahara dried up. Drought in eastern Mediterranean region, which affected civilizations and health as well. So the temperature variations around the smooth graph at half decadal scale are only plus minus half a degree, and they have still had massive effects on civilizations and health. This should give us pause in terms of where we may be headed into the future here. So Roman warm period we talked about, where the conditions were favorable, agricultural production expanded, which may have allowed them to survive and expand. There was a cold acute cooling around 536 Common Era. Medieval warm period, Europe had massive changes in agriculture, wine production, beer production, Vikings and so on. Little Ice Age came and had the opposite effect on wine production, beer production, agriculture and so on. And now we are heading into the future where again agricultural production, wine production and health are major concerns. There have been little events like Tambora eruption, which gave a very good window into not only how volcanic eruptions and the associated aerosol loading, especially in the stratosphere, can create solar dimming, widespread droughts, cooling, crop losses and so on, which are actually analogs for some of the solar engineering ideas that are being considered for managing the warming under the broad category of geoengineering. There is a course I have on that you can look up, but without digressing too much, civilizations evolved. We went from hunter-gatherers, which actually had a few infectious diseases, but most of the ones we developed since, chickenpox, smallpox, mumps, measles and so on, may all have been schistosomiasis, trypanosomiasis, diabetes, etc. may have been modern human diseases. In the tropics, of course, there were infectious diseases. Then there are chronic diseases. So things like diabetes are now again related to food quality, obesity, pollution, and so on. So you can see that we have this running theme of human ecology and health. But the big shift from hunter-gatherers high protein diet to the highly carbohydrate rich diet of the agricultural societies did create many problems, including health that depended on class. For example, poorer people had less access to good nutritious food, so they were more subject to health issues compared to rich classes. So there was evolution of civilization with the class systems in various forms, either economic classes or religious and so on over time, and they had impacts on health as well. So there are geographic differences in things like osteoporosis, vitamin D deficiencies. You had to either get it by changing skin color and adjusting to low levels of lights at high latitudes, or if you maintain the dark skin, vitamin D had to come from fish and marine mammals and so on, which happens for some of the human societies that live at high latitudes and yet maintain darker skin colors. So you can see that there's whole host of issues. There is relation between nutrition and fertility rates, and how something like polycystic ovarian syndrome or something like this was part of the fertility and nutrition adaptation among humans. And also many of the viruses and bacteria, they are not really trying to make us sick. We inherit them by changing vegetation, by doing agriculture, exposing ourselves to water in the river, pathogens, and of course in the air as well. And they are just trying to attach to cells and use us as a host to propagate themselves by making us sneeze, cough, diarrhea, allergies, and so on. But those are the way they want to propagate, and it's our body's reaction to those foreign bodies inside us that make us sick. So this has a subtle difference in terms of whether they are really evolving to make us sick or they are just trying to use us, and our body reacts violently and tries to get rid of them through coughing, sneezing, diarrhea, and other things. And fever could be an alarm bell, and so on and so forth. So this is part of that story. Rock art from Teshwinat to rock shelter southwest of Libya. This tracing shows Saharan pastoralists with pots and cattle reproduced in Danetal and so on. So this is a story of how we went from hunter-gatherers to relying on domestication of animals, not just dogs for various tasks like sheep herding, cattle herding, protection, etc., but also for milk and meat and other dairy products. And lactose provides a good example of how human ecology and genetic adaptations happen. Humans consume mother's milk when infants, and then the gene for releasing enzyme lactase to digest lactose, the sugar in the milk, gets turned off, but consuming cattle milk then requires it to be kept alive through life. So now you have some groups that are perfectly able to deal with milk and lactose, whereas some are intolerant. Scandinavians apparently are the most lactose intolerant in Europe. I think maybe Chinese are also not as lactose intolerant as some of the other populations, and there are similar adaptations to gluten, which also became much more common with agriculture, comes from wheat. So there is celiac disease, which is gluten allergy, which is not uncommon. There are nut allergies. It's unclear how climate change itself introduces some of the allergies versus how many are carried over the Holocene due to dietary changes and so on. Okay. So that gives us a sense of where the human ecology and health are connected. So these are the variation in temperatures over the Holocene, and we are looking at +5 to -3 over here. So wetter and warmer periods and drier and cooler periods. So looking quickly. Rapid high mortality, demise of early Iron Age civilization, central Sweden, 540 CE. By the way, along the way, iron reminds me there were also many deficiencies, iron deficiency and other nutrient deficiencies related to dietary changes along the way as well. So you can see various diseases here, plague, human-rodent contact, so that arose out of that, starvation, epidemic deaths, Coquelutzil epidemics in post-conquest Aztecs due to decadal droughts, and you have nascent Mesopotamian Egypt in medieval Europe, increased agricultural production, population increase, crowded quarters, infectious diseases. So malaria extends to north, Roman Empire spreads north, food population, malaria extends north. The declines in Mesopotamia, Maya and Anasazi occurred with severe droughts for more than 2 centuries, which led to malnutrition and conflict. There were impacts on stature. Actually, adult height dropped from hunter-gatherers, high-protein diet to agricultural societies with carbohydrate-rich diets. Death rates went up, but fertility also dropped in 17th century Europe. Little Ice Age infected rats cohabit cohabiting humans, Nile riverine settlements collapse, Younger Dryas. So I'm just rushing through them basically because I want you to get an idea that climate, human evolution, human diets, health, they have all been interacting with each other, which is why we call it human ecology. And here is a more specific timeline. Before 8500 BCE, Africa was fairly dry and warm. Sahara was a desert, savanna, grassland, so most of the civilizations of the time were concentrated around the Nile, which itself is a very temperamental river with large variability in its flow and the delta here and so on and so forth. 8500 to 7000 before Common Era, it got greener because of solar forcing, something like Hallstatt solar activity cycle of 2300 years, which increases forcing, radiation forcing, moves the ITCZ, the intertropical convergence zone, increases rainfall, and populations spread out into the western parts. And then 7000 to 5300 BC, rain dropped off, but many societies managed to survive in the drier parts by managing some sort of food production, cattle, water, and so on. But by 5300 to 3500 BCE, they all came back more towards the Nile because it became harder and harder, because the lake levels dropped, water became a real issue, and so on and so forth. So this is a clear example of how humans are looking for opportunities to expand and then shrink back when climate becomes unfriendly. This is a timeline during 6000 BC to current, to 0 BC, sorry, focused on climatic change in Eurasia and Egypt, the growth of those early civilizations and successive technology ages. So here, cold period, early Mesopotamian agrarians, Holocene climatic optimum here, cooler, drier in northern hemisphere, including Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Sahara. So the late Neolithic Stone Age, and you have Nile Valley civilizations, which led to Sumerians, Akkadian, Babylonian, Akkadian Empire, Babylonian civilizations. Holocene climatic optimum 2 here, cooler, drier Eurasia, including China and Mongolia, and related to drought, Eastern Mediterranean, Mesopotamia, Indus Valley civilization disappeared. Northern hemisphere monsoon moves south, so the Afghanistan, Pakistan, Northwest India region where the Mohenjo-daro Harappa civilization existed couldn't deal with the so here are the Indus Harappan civilization. East Mediterranean Dark Age here related to drought and cooling over Egypt, East Mediterranean, Mesopotamia, and South Asia, and so on. And then we had Bronze Age in the Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean. Bronze Age came to China as well, and then the Iron Age started around here into 0 BC and entering the Common Era. Okay, again, just a quick run through the kind of climate change, human innovation, resource limitations and adversities typically have led to innovations in terms of tools, agriculture, water harvesting, water storage, but this is what is referred to by Tony Michaels as Faustian bargain, where you trade your soul for some advantages like this, but they come with a heavy cost. There is no free lunch, right? This is the Fertile Crescent region indicating the civilizations of early Egypt and Mesopotamia. Inside the dashed ellipses here, Tigris River, where agriculture really took hold and then expanded out, presumably, as best as we can tell. And here in the Nile Delta and Nile River region in the upper and lower Egypt. Okay, so this is the Fertile Crescent, which is been known as where agriculture evolved and spread out. Okay. What else can we say? Pioneer microbes from Thomas McKeevan says in The Origins of Human Disease, Remarkably, we owe the origin of most serious infectious diseases to the conditions which led to our cultural heritage, the city-states made possible by planting of crops in the floodplains of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Indus Valley. So the idea that we inherited a lot of our diseases from hunter-gatherers doesn't seem to be so true. We created them all on our own by shifting to this agricultural lifestyle, agrarian pastoralists lifestyle, crowding with the animals, being near water, changing diet from high protein to carbohydrates, increased fertility, population, crowding cities, urban dwellings, and so on and so forth. Okay? Quick run through, but you get the idea of how human ecology has over time led to many of the diseases we still carry. Most of them we carry now.